Welcome to the Gen Z Journey, where we work with you through an entrepreneurial lens to build a wholesome perspective on life and build both our business and personal dreams together. Join our community on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Gen Z Journey. So, hello and welcome to another Gen Z Journey podcast. You're here today with myself, Aaron and Joe, as we discuss this week's topic, and it's actually the first topic in our next three-part series, which is on personal development, and more specifically within that, it's on mindset. And this first kind of episode in this three-part series is focusing specifically on two mindsets, which I'm sure are very, very well known by many people, and that is the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. So we're going to dive straight in with a little bit of detail on that. But as I like to always say at the start of podcasts, you can find these podcasts now on YouTube as well. So do go over and check them out if you want to see us having the conversation, see Joe cracking some jokes, I always try and put a little bit more into the edit for the YouTube, so you'll definitely have some laughs on there from on the YouTube. So go and check that out for sure. But let's jump straight into it. So Aaron, the first question, as we always do for the discussion podcast, what were your motives behind writing this article, and why did you pick the growth and fixed mindset as the first article for this series?
Sure. So it actually comes from a book that I read a couple years back called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it's been one of my long-term favorite books for a very big reason. For me, it was very eye-opening, and it allowed me to really be able to reflect on myself and the way I have my perception of everything I do in my daily life. To give it a little bit of an overview, the fixed mindset is a mindset where you really are fixed in your ways, per se, where you really have a hard time with challenges, approaching challenges. You have a hard time approaching different obstacles. There's this idea that what you're given, what you're born with is what you have, and you can't really grow from there. You can't succeed and go beyond that. Versus a growth mindset is essentially the exact opposite of that, where you really you believe that effort can lead to improvement, where you do believe that you can be successful and you can develop your skills. By putting in that time, that effort, you actually embrace challenges, and you're willing to face the obstacles in your life, as long as it eventually leads to that success and you do see that success.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why I love that we picked kind of this article and this topic as the first topic, is because I feel that this growth mindset is something that essentially we practice a huge amount of at the Gen Z Journey as a team, and we want to convey to people. But also, I feel it's just a fundamental basis to that personal development journey that we speak of so much, and when we refer to the Gen Z journey and we refer to our journeys, a lot of the time we're on those journeys because we are in that growth mindset. We're seeing the challenges, we're trying to overcome them and come up with new innovative ways to do things. So yeah, definitely that's why it excites me that we picked this topic as the first one, because I think it's a great way for us to start off this kind of personal development series in that sense. But Joe, did you have anything else to kind of add to the understanding of what a growth and what a fixed mindset is?
Just because we're in business, we see these two mindsets all the time. And I'm not going to say that one is found in any particular business. They're shared all the time, because you'll see businesses that are in a routine and maybe don't get out of that rut. And so we then see that as they're stuck in that mindset. And then we see ones that are growing very rapidly with the times, concurring with the times, going with the flow, because maybe they have big business, and then they can adapt to it. So adapting to the business with a good mindset and with a growth mindset, it shows the acceleration of any good business.
I think it's important to know here when Joe is saying that you don't find one mindset more than another in a specific industry. It's also important to note that people can carry more than one mindset and they can just lean towards one side or the other. And usually as an entrepreneur and someone that is very willing to create their own ideas and be innovative and creative, that type of entrepreneurial lifestyle actually leans to the growth mindset. And that's someone like Joe who, it doesn't matter if he's older than us, and if he didn't grow up with technology, he pushes to learn technology, or he pushes to adapt his business to the current situation with COVID. It's always innovation and creativity and that adaptability like he's talking about.
Absolutely, and that's also part of that excitement that we share, and the fact that we're all very still like Joe is now at a very different point on his journey than we are, and I'm on a different point to Aaron and Aaron. And if you go and listen to the previous podcast of our new member that we've introduced to the Gen Z team, you'll know that Peter is on a different path as well. But even though we're on our individual journeys, we can draw a lot of similarities. Even like we said, with the age gap with us and Joe, he's still practicing and in much better ways because he has the experience, but he's still practicing a lot of the things that we're learning now, which is awesome to see as well. It allows you to project yourself and your mindset into the future much more accurately, for sure. But Aaron, there's one thing I wanted to touch on within these mindsets, which I think people have maybe some misconceptions over, or kind of think a certain way about a lot of the time, and that's this idea of effort when we have a fixed mindset and we have a growth mindset. So like with effort in the fixed mindset, they see that effort, if effort is put in and it's fruitless or it doesn't work out, then it's not worth it. So putting in effort to overcome a challenge is not really worth it. Whereas a person with a growth mindset will put in as much effort as they can until not only do they overcome the problem, but then they master the solution to it, right? And I think a lot of the time that can be kind of misconstrued, and I think people can look on mastery as kind of negative. They can be like, actually, it's not a good idea to be obsessed and try and be a master of everything, which I agree in certain senses, but I think a lot of the time people miss the fact that actually, if you listen to a professional athlete or something, they might have had the greatest game of their life, but then you say, how do you think you perform? It's like, oh, well, there was this, I missed this pass, or, they're still on that road to mastery. And for me, that's fascinating and really quite exciting. So I was just wondering if you could maybe address some of the things that people may think around that. Like I said, people can have negative connotations with kind of mastery. So how would you really define what mastery is and what it can mean to someone?
Yeah, so mastery is a very interesting concept. I actually know from previous research that people consider you mastering a skill and being really good in a skill once you've put somewhere between 600 to 800 hours of work into it. Once you're at that point, you can still continue to grow, even though you've mastered the skills. If you're someone that wants to continue to be fresh in those skills, you have to continue to practice those skills at all times. And then I think it's also important to note that skills often change. The way even someone like me, who just is going into the financial industry, we're still going to be constantly changing the way we look at finances and the way we adapt to finances, because 20 years ago there wasn't virtual banks, there wasn't something like the blockchain, and being able to constantly adapt to the changes of an environment is really important. So even though you might be considered a master at a skill, you're not going to be a master forever. So there's always that ability to grow. because of that constant change. There's always that constant ability to continue to master a skill. So that's really important to consider. And I do believe that you can master a skill to a certain degree when you put in effort, and that you can continue to improve that skill. So that's important to know, that even though you're not strong at something, that you can put in that time and effort and get to near mastery, near perfection of that skill.
Isn't it amazing the capacity of what our brains can do?
Yeah, definitely is.
We're only just getting to the point in which we can have a computer store and process information as fast as a brain. So that kind of shows you how much computing power we really have. And Joe, I want you to kind of comment on this next as well. But I'm going to get kind of little deep and philosophical for a minute. But there was a speech done by Matthew McConaughey. That's how you say his name? I think it is. And it was when he won his Grammy Award, I believe. And he, not Grammy Award, sorry, Oscars. What am I talking about? When he won an Oscar. And he made a speech, and it was about how someone came up to him when he was quite young, I think in his 20s, and they said, who do you want to be like in 10 years? And he said, I tell you what, I don't know, I'll get back to you on that. So a week later, the person came back and they asked him. And he said, it's me in 10 years' time. And so then the person went away or he didn't speak to the person for 10 years. And then that person came back and they said, at the 10-year mark, they said, are you who you wanted to be in 10 years? And he goes, yeah, I was. And they're like, so who do you want to be in 10 years? And he says, I want to be myself again in 10 years. And so he kept moving that boundary, 10 years ahead, 10 years ahead. And I think this is absolutely beautiful, the way in which he finished. The way in which he finished is he said, and that's all right, because by keep moving myself 10 years down the line, I'm always focused on the present. I'm always focused on the journey that I'm currently on. And he said, there's nothing more important. There's nothing more important. And for me, that was just like mind blowing. That was huge, because a lot of the time, particularly at my age and being young, we're very much forced to like, what's your future like? What's your future like? What did you enjoy in the past, and what do you want to enjoy in the future? But actually, one thing I've learned is just focusing on the present and what you're doing now, and putting all of your effort into that, will lead to a much richer future, not monetary necessarily, but emotionally, mentally, in just a general wealth of a life. It will lead you to a more kind of better future in that sense. And I think a great example of that, not only from that speech, but also is our guest this week. If you listen into the Friday podcast, you'll hear Ron Pekarsky speaking, and he's a man I just have so much admiration for following his purpose throughout his life and being on that journey and just enjoying the moment and really having that growth mindset. He's I don't want to say his age or anything, but he's an older generation, and he was excitedly telling me about how he was using technology to convey his great in-depth knowledge of food. He's a food scientist, so he was telling me how he was rigging up his iPhone to convey that information. And I think if that's not the definition of a growth mindset, I don't know what is. But definitely I would stay tuned for that this weekend. And I mean, Joe, just take it away on kind of just what I said there. I said kind of quite a bunch of things, but
reflecting on what you just said about being in the present, but yet having the mind growth of saying going ahead into the future, or 10 years, 5 years, doesn't matter. By doing that now, what you do is it's like a piece of clay. You shape it now. And when you're in the present moment, you can shape it because you're thinking about where you want to be. And those are the tiny footsteps to get you where you want. And then you're enjoying it because you're actually creating it now.
That I completely agree on. I mean, me working right now actually with the new business that I'm working on, Zenovis. I see my future 1 year and ahead. I'm planning out for how many clients I'll have in a year, and I'm starting to figure out how I'm going to forecast my financials for the next upcoming year and whatnot. But at the same time, I'm taking it one step at a time, where I break down my to-dos that I have to do on a daily basis. I have to register a DBA. I have to do this and that. I have to start a domain. I have to build out my website. I have to figure out how to get leads. And even though I have that future outlook, I also take it step by step to be able to figure out how I'm going to get to that future outlook.
Beautiful. Yes. And then what you'll see is if you get stuck and you can't keep on going because your mindset was redundant, or you're not believing in where you're going with it, people will get right into that, and that's the opposite of the growth mindset also. So, and that's where a lot of companies get very stagnant. So, there's definitely the two that we live every day.
Absolutely, and I think there's definitely got to be said of something in terms of long term, mid term, short term goals are super key as well. Like don't get me wrong, focusing on the present is awesome, but you like having future goals and aspirations is awesome as well. But I think there's one thing of having intention, and then there's one thing of having like an over detailed plan. I think sometimes if you have an over detailed plan, and it's like it's had so much time put into it, you know to the date in which you're going to complete something. Sometimes that can lead you to have more of a fixed mindset, because then you don't allow any straying away from that detail. And sometimes for something to really be made into something even greater than you thought, you've got to allow some molding and sculpting to take place, which is where I believe that intention comes with. Having that growth mindset, you have the intention of mastering. Like Aaron with his new business, he's gonna master the skills necessary to succeed in that business, but he's not necessarily going to exactly know where it's going to be in a year, because he's just going to start working on it and see where it goes. He's going to develop partnerships and see where they go. He's just going to keep developing it. And again, the Gen Z is a great example of that. I had no idea we'd be at this point 3 or 4 months in, having started it in the first week. This is way beyond my vision, and I'm so grateful that I started out with intention rather than like, right, it's going to be like this. I'm not allowing anybody else on. I want sole ownership. It's definitely been a journey of growth for me.
And I think when that journey is going, and then the creativity comes, that's where it explodes, and that's where the fun comes in. And again, you'll still get to point B like you want to. You'll still get to the next thing, but you'll see that all the things that happen in between, and the fun and part of the journey, and then all of a sudden more learning comes in, right, Aaron? You're going, wow, I just thought it was a couple of clicks, and now you're looking into new innovation, right? So
exactly. Awesome. Well, I've realised that we have gone on a little more than our usual 15 minutes for this podcast, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to apologise in advance for if any of the kind of any of the standard run times for our podcast run over this week, because this is definitely a topic I'm super passionate about and I love talking about. So if I get a little bit of a boast, do forgive me because I just love this topic, and I like going into depth about it. But I hope you enjoyed this discussion podcast. Again, as always, we have the link in the description for this article. So please go and read it. We referred to a couple of bits in there, but it lists out all of those kind of thought processes of the growth and of the fixed mindset, so you can really compare and maybe even test out where you're at. Maybe you're more of a fixed mindset than you thought. I know in times of my life I've gone and referenced this, and I've been way more fixed than I thought I was. So definitely I encourage you to go and have a check out of that article on the website. That'll be up. And then stay tuned for the interview this Friday that will be released at 12 p.m. We'll finish as we always do.
Cheers for now.
As always, head over to the Instagram and Facebook at Gen Z Journey, where you can get an inside scoop of what's going on behind the scenes, as well as seeing the exciting guests that are coming on for that week. But above all else, thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate all your participation, and we're excited you're on this journey with us. See you next time.